computer is picking up a strange signal. Here, sir, you better take a look at it.
Hi, and welcome to Sci-Fi Snacks. I'm Liz J. Bradley, a science fiction author and poet who adores short fiction and snacks. Each episode of Sci-Fi Snacks is a short and sweet, or salty, discussion of what I loved, what I learned, and what I snacked on while reading new-to-me short science fiction. As always, links to the short stories are in the show notes, so if you haven't read this week's story, head on over, pick up your favorite snack, and then join me as we discuss this week's story. Hello and welcome to episode 32 of Sci-Fi Snacks, our second podcast dropping today on February 19th. 2026, and I am so excited to have you here. Today's story is called The Portmeirion Road by Fiona Moore, and I read this one in Clark's World, which, as I am doing the stats for this season and looking at past nominations, Clark's World just dominates, and there are maybe 4 or 5 of these venues for science fiction that really seem to churn out in a positive way. Really good, well-rated, well-nominated stories. And I think there's a couple of reasons for this. First of all, everything in Clark's World is free to read online, and that accessibility should not be understated because Asimov's Analog, they have amazing stories as well, but you can't read those online. The only reason I'm able to read a bunch of those is my brother gets a subscription and I get his past ones, and I got a whole bunch as a Christmas present one. So if you're not paying and subscribing to their paper copies or going to a bookstore that maybe carries them, you're not getting access. And that's in the US where there's a lot of access. I can't even imagine what it's like trying to get your hands on some of those copies where the bookstore infrastructure isn't as widespread or something like that. I just think that, you know, looking at Clark's World, Uncanny, Lightspeed, Small Wonders, some other ones that I will go back into the stats. I think maybe we'll do a quick stats roundup for the last episode of this season, where I'm sure someone out there has done like an aggregate stats of all past years and nominations and where they're coming from. But just, I try to keep it balanced on this podcast, and even though I've been actively like looking for stories from different markets so that it's not just like, this isn't just the Clark's World podcast. They have their own, actually. It's really awesome. Go check it out. But I wanted to read widely. So I did find that I'm running into the issue. It's the same 4 or 5 venues. And it's not that they have a monopoly on good stories, for sure. I think there's more good stories out there than there are professional paying markets. But I really think it has to do with they're attracting a lot of really talented authors because they're the ones paying the most. And then the accessibility of the stories for readers who can then go on to nominate. And then once the nomination ballots are out there and everybody knows, okay, these are like the 5 shortlisted stories, you can then, if you can only read 4 of them because one is in an obscure magazine that you can't get your hands on, you're probably not going to vote for that one. So I do think that there are some other things going on in terms of what stories get nominated, what stories go on to win. I know that part of this season for me was like, what makes a winning story? And I think that what I'm coming to realize is like, table stakes is the good story. There are so many good stories out there and just not enough time to read them all. So accessibility is going to play a huge part. Just getting eyeballs on your story to get it nominated, to get it on the ballot so that more eyeballs are on your story so that you then even have a shot. So I think that there are so many talented writers out there who have never been nominated, their work is no less good than anything I've read this season. And so I'm taking a little bit of that to heart, as well as somebody who has, I always send my stories to Clarkesworld first because they're amazing. They pay well. They get all the awards. Their turnaround time is like 3 days on a rejection. So you're not waiting very long. So of course I'm going to send it there first. Of course it's a dream market. And I think that that's just part of it. It's the dream market for lots of people. Anybody who's plugged in and knows what's going on, they're going to send their stuff to Clarkesworld first. So yeah, I think that has to do with part of what I'm seeing in these stats. So let's dive into this week. Our snack this week was a popular one in my household. I had to fight the children to get even half of it. Airheads Xtremes Candy. This is not going to be for everyone. It's like sour strips of candy. When I put it on the shopping list, the shared shopping list that my husband and I use, I literally put Rainbow Road candy because if you see it, it's literally like, it looks like Rainbow Road from the Mario Kart games, where it's just like a rainbow strip and then it's covered in whatever it is. I think citric acid is what makes it sour. So these are the little Rainbow Road Airheads strips. They don't actually taste anything like original Airheads. I think I like those better. But this one, just because of the title of the story, the Portmeirion Road, I was like, ooh, snack. What snack is like a road? I mean, I probably could have done like a granola bar because you hike and eat granola bars, but that's boring and I wanted candy. So I chose the Rainbow Road candy. And we will see how well my intuition matched that snack at the end of the podcast. Now, our author, Fiona Moore, is a BSFA award-winning WFA shortlisted writer, academic, and critic, author of Management Lessons from Game of Thrones and Morag and Seamus series of cozy post-apocalyptic stories. Her work has appeared in Clarkesworld, Escape Pod, and Interzone, and she has published 2 novels. She makes miniatures and runs a blog about cooking food from franchise tie-in cookbooks. She lives in London with a snowshoe cat who's not bothered about anything. I am so intrigued by so many things in this bio. I think I love reading writers' bios because I know as a writer myself, I'm like, I don't want to write a bio. Everybody hates writing a bio, but there have been so many just like really clever, really interesting people that I've read their stories on the podcast. And I'm always like in this management lessons from Game of Thrones. Yes, I need that book. I have to, because it's going to be amazing. And as somebody who reads a lot of nonfiction for like real serious lessons and for actual like work, I need to know if this is full-on satire or if we are like actually learning real management strategies from Game of Thrones. Either way, I'm super into it. So that is going on my TBR immediately. I also love that we learned that she has a series of these cozy post-apocalyptic stories, because when I was reading reviews of this story, they were like, it feels like this is just this window into a wider world, and I hope she writes more. Well, guess what? She did. So I'm going to have to look for some of the other ones because I love this. This story, the Portmeirion Road, comes in at 5,700 words. So that fits squarely into short story land. And it was the 2024 BSFA Award finalist for Best Short Fiction. Now, in this story, our main character mentioned in her bio was Morag. And Morag is someone who is really good with technology. We find out that she's great at fixing things. If it's got circuits in it, if it's got electricity in it, she just kind of like has a brain for that sort of thing. And she works on a farm. She's always fixing their equipment, fixing the equipment for other people. And yes, like Moore's bio said, This is definitely your cozy post-apocalyptic, which is really interesting because I love post-apocalyptic. I have not been a huge fan of cozy stories up until this point, but I will give it to Fiona Moore. I think you changed my mind. I think this is how you do a cozy story that keeps my attention. And we'll break it down later, maybe what made this one different. So we find out in the beginning that Morag's niece is having some health issues. So they keep calling it chronic lung disease. They kind of know the word asthma, but it's not really a well-known thing. So it is nothing like it is now where it's just like, oh, get an inhaler, get your meds. And like, yes, asthma is a big problem nowadays, but we have ways to treat it. In this world, they do not. That knowledge has been lost and they're just doing the best they can. But asthma untreated is super dangerous and can be deadly. So when Morag is over at her brother's, she's talking with them and they're like, we just don't know what to do. And it gets brought up that maybe she should go to the archive over in Portmeirion. And Portmeirion is a place that is kind of like this shining city on a hill in this post-apocalyptic land. It's got the archive, which is this depository of all of the human knowledge that they can gather. And it seems like it was started by I thought that this was an interesting little tidbit, that it sounded like it was people who got run out of other places who kind of moved in here and said, we're going to do this. And then there were disgruntled grad students and there was a lot of like these little seeds of fun information and glimpses at this history. So it's really exciting that there are more stories in this because I would love to know more about the archive and the archivists there. But regardless, Morag is going to go there and she's going to stay with a glass blower that they know and help her out. So she helps out the glass blower. They're chatting about the archive and how, the people there are kind of weird and they're kind of, they were outsiders who came in and they don't really interact with the outside world, but they do help people. So she decides to go and she has an appointment and she is bringing with her on this journey her robot called Seamus. And Seamus is a robot that helps out on the farm. And she's pretty sure at one point it was some sort of like security robot, but no longer, now it's the farm robot and she brought it along on her journey for protection. And so obviously the robot's coming with her to the archive as well. And at the archive, she meets Saoirse, the archivist, who is like the person to greet her. She's not who she's there to see. She's there to see like a bigger panel of the top archivists. But Saoirse gives her a little tour and is like, hey, come see this room. It's like all our technology stuff. And Morag thinks it's really cool, but also a little weird that she sees all of these like circuit designs and technical drawings and all of this stuff in 2D that she deals with in 3D every day. And one of the things about Morag that we had learned was that she is always worried about what's going to happen to her and her body and her health, because both of her parents had some pretty serious health issues at the end. And she feels like almost a ticking time bomb. So she's not quite sure how long she can continue to do what she does. And she's seeing this glimpse into a world that is very different from what she does, but also very similar. So that's an interesting little bit we're left with. And then the main archivists are ready for her. And so she is ushered in. And this is I thought that this was an interesting little bit where we got this meta moment of like Morag thinking, oh, this is kind of like a fairy tale. This is the way it's set up with the panel of the archivists sitting up there and her pleading her case of what she needed. And then them saying, well, we would need something in return. And she's like, oh, yeah, it is very much like a fairy tale. And then they ask for Seamus the robot. And Morag is just like, wait, what? Like, that's my robot. And they're like, yeah, well, we don't have anything like that here. It would be great to study. You know, the robot, we're sure, would be happy here. And Morag just can't say yes right away. And she can't really reckon with how she feels about it because she knows that Seamus the robot is not necessarily sentient, but she can't prove it to herself. And so there's a lot of discussion about intelligence versus consciousness versus sentience. And she knows she shouldn't be anthropomorphizing her robot because it's just a robot. And there's this discussion about, you know, is it like a farmer's sheep? The sheep don't consent to being butchered, but the sheep also, if they decide to escape and go somewhere else and you can't bring them back, like, you know, what level of freedom do they have? Who has ownership over something that is alive? Your robot's not alive. Who has ownership over it? And so she's got to kind of grapple with all of that. And she goes out and looks over the water. It's this really kind of peaceful scene, and Seamus is there and she's musing on. And Seamus, I think, is in sleep mode or something. And then he turns on and goes off and like digs a little hole and hunkers down in the little hole. And she's just like, that was weird. Like, what inside this robot's programming had him do this thing? And that's the moment for her where she's like, I know what I have to do. So she goes back to the archivist and she's like, I can't give you Seamus. They're like, okay, well, we tried, you know, thanks. If you ever change your mind, you can always come back and we can do the research for you and you can give us Seamus, and that's the deal. And she's like, okay. And she leaves and she's headed back out on the road. And that's when Saoirse stops her and is like, hey, wait, like, I have something for you. And she has this folder and it is full of all of the information. Now, she and Saoirse had talked briefly about, you know, why she was there and all of that. And she just gives it away. And Morag's like, wait, what? Like, I'm not giving up my robot. What's going on? And she's like, oh no, like, I did this research. So it's mine to give away for free if I want, or to ask for something. But like, I did the work, so I get to decide what to do with it. And I don't even know if it's going to help you. Like, it's talking about corticosteroids and all of these things, but like, we don't even have access. So like, I don't even know if this is even worth anything, but I did the research. I'm going to give it to you. And so Morag is just like, I see. I see how this is all kind of set up. And so then Saoirse says, you know, you are welcome here anytime. We would love to have you. You could, you know, this is the game. You do the research. It becomes yours to do with what you want. And we would be happy to have you. And Morag is like, not right now. I'm not ready for this. But maybe my niece, like, if she survives this would be such a good place for her. Her niece would be a great scientist. She had tried to be a doctor and they were like, she's just too interested in like cutting people apart and poking and prodding and asking why. She doesn't want to actually like heal people. She's just too curious. So she does say that, you know, if these corticosteroids work and they figure out something and she's stable, like, maybe this would be a great place for her to go. And Morag feels like maybe someday this is a place that she could go when her body is no longer working, but she needs to keep working with her mind. And she thanks her, and then she heads out on the road and she's like, I feel like I've won. And that's where the story ends. And she heads home. So I think that this story has broken the streak of me being bored by cozy stories. I really, really liked this one. I thought that it dealt with a lot of really interesting themes. It built a world that was interesting to me. And while, yes, there weren't any like crazy explosions or world-ending things, like that had all already happened. Like, the apocalypse has happened. We're now in this kind of like gray middle space, and we're just dealing with life. And it is life and death. I think that's part of it, is like the stakes in this are really high. And maybe that's just because I know, like, I've had family members with asthma. I've known people, I've grown up with it, who have unfortunately passed away, even with today's technology. Like, asthma is no joke. And so maybe to me, the stakes felt high enough here, but it still was a cozy story. So I don't know quite what the perfect balance or recipe is for cozy stories that Liz loves, but this is one of them. Another thing I really loved here was this kind of casting of academia versus the real world as a thing that has even survived the apocalypse. So I don't know if you know anyone in academia, but it really is a different world. I mean, they talk about the ivory tower and the academics sitting up in there. And there's just, I think it comes with any sort of niche world. Like if you've ever worked in tech, that's its own whole world. It's crazy. And nobody's out there just, well, I know people are out there being like, oh, tech bros. So this whole thing of academia is not the real world. Well, the tech bubble isn't the real world either. But we all like to kind of, this seems to be a really popular and a really strongly persistent idea that academics are somehow outside of the world. And in this story, they really are. You know, there is this one moment where Saoirse had been like, oh, we've wanted to meet with you for so long. Like, we're so happy you finally made it here. And Morag's like, you could have come out to the farm. Like, we would have you anytime. And she just has this look and she's like, you know, we could. Huh. How about that? And then they just move on. So it really is its own world in this story. And I kind of love that persisted post-apocalypse because, you know, of course it would. People don't change. People are always the same. I also really love this discussion in the story of intelligence versus, what did I say? Consciousness versus sentience and anthropomorphizing robots. And Morag made the comment, you know, because I don't know, I can't dismiss the possibility. And just being able to be comfortable in that space of, I don't know. And I don't know about you, but I have been really burned out on stories lately. I know it's such a popular like story idea of AI and their feelings and their emotions and all of those things. But because of what's going on in the real world with, you know, large language models and this just insistence that everything is AI, even stuff that isn't, quote, AI, like artificial intelligence, is just burning me out. I can't read any of those stories and take them seriously because I'm just like, it's not cute. It's like an active threat against our environment, against the livelihoods of so many people. And it's just not something that I can like suspend my disbelief, especially anything written prior to 2024 that's like, oh, look at this lovely AI that we're going to, you know, be from their point of view. I can't read it. I'm over it. So this story was nice in the fact that it was not from an AI's point of view, but from a very human point of view and practical technology. You know, Seamus is a robot that has purpose. So when there's this thing going around, and I missed the beginning of it, I'm just seeing the reaction as, you know, most social media trends are, where it's like, is there any tech that the left likes? And it's like, well, yeah, like practical tech. Stuff that's there to like protect, you know, tech that solves problems. So like the stuff they're trying to preserve in the archives here, you know, computers are amazing. Like I look at my desk right now and it's covered in technology that allows me to take the thoughts in my heads about stories I've read and share them with you. Literally people all over the world listen to this podcast, which blows my freaking mind because like, you don't know me. You have no like obligation to listen to me chat for like 20 to 30 minutes every week about a science fiction story, but you do because technology can connect us. So yeah, there is tech that the left likes. It's the tech that's like connecting people and supporting our humanity. All of the like cancer research and the amazing things that have happened that have taken things that are like death sentences and made it so that people can actually survive and live longer. Like, yes, heck yes, let's fund that. You know, I don't need ChatGPT to write my emails for me. I do need algorithms to find the cancer cells and figure out how to kill them. So yeah, there is tech that I like. And in this story, I kind of went off on a little rampage there. I am a certified hater of LLMs. I'm not going to lie. So you can't change my mind. And I'm going to go off on a tangent. But we're going to go back to the story now. And Seamus the robot. Love Seamus the robot. He's so quirky and so cute. And yeah, we're going to anthropomorphize him because he does weird things. Like, why would you take those hands that weren't built to dig holes? And why would you dig a hole and hide in it? What's there? I don't know. But you're not actively trying to kill everybody. So you're a good robot. We can keep you around. We like you. Leading into kind of what I learned from this story, I went back through and I both listened to this story and read it. And one of the things that I learned kind of about myself, this is a lesson I keep learning because I keep thinking, maybe this time it'll be different. But I can't listen to fiction if I'm doing something else. Like just listening to the audio version. I miss stuff. When I went through and read it the second time, I was like, oh, I had gotten some things backwards. I had missed some stuff. So yeah, unless I'm like doing dishes or driving somewhere, I cannot listen to fiction and keep the whole story in my head in like audiobook style. Nonfiction, totally different story. Like, I don't know why. I don't think you need to keep as many threads going. And nonfiction like repeats itself a lot. So it's not like fiction where if you miss one line, all of a sudden you're like, wait, what? What's going on? And you have to rewind. So I did learn that about myself. I do need to like read the story, especially if I'm listening when I could be distracted. So that's just like a personal thing. But what I learned from like the actual story, the first thing is looking at this balance of kind of future dystopian, post-apocalyptic rebuilding. I think that this story struck a really interesting balance. A lot of what I've read, and I won't say what's out there because there's so much out there that I haven't read, but like a lot of what's popular is, you know, full collapse and we're running around in the woods and, you know, it's the last breath of survival. Or it's like, here's this crazy dystopian utopia world, like, you know, like Uglies and Pretties, where it's like crazy tech and everything, but like actually it's all evil. And this story kind of didn't fit either of those molds. It had, you know, a lot of technology that's kind of sequestered away that they might not even know what to do with. But it's also not this shining, you know, technology. Portmeirion may be the shining city on the hill, but the rest of the world, like, there are people dying of stuff that we don't die of today because they've just lost that information. Or, as one of the academics put it in the archive, asthma's not really a big problem anymore because, well, the people who have it just don't pass on their genes because they die from it. And it's like, ooh, okay, yeah, this is clearly not like an ideal world anymore. But it was a lot more subtle. So that was interesting. And I want to think about how I can play in worlds that feel similar in terms of not going to one extreme or the other and thinking about like, what is the gray area in between? This kind of goes with the other story from this week with What Any Dead Thing Wants. You know, they weren't terraforming, they weren't colonizing, they were in that weird middle space. So that kind of works out cool thematically that they both fell this week. Or maybe that's just where my brain is. I also really liked and learned from this story about how to frame a story with the world building and the locations, like straight up from the title, you know, the Portmeirion Road. We're talking about literally two different places, you know, the more rural and the city and the road connecting them. And just like, even from there, how much symbolism and metaphor kind of springs from just how it's set up in terms of the world building. And so I love that the world building in this created opportunities for like layers of meaning. And I think that that's something that I have not begun to explore in my own work. I just kind of plop stuff down wherever it is. And so I think that thinking more intentionally about location and setting could be a really cool lesson for me. So I want to keep thinking about that. And I also loved the tech and sentience without it being an AI story. And I think that that's something that I will have to learn to balance in science fiction now that, you know, everything's AI and these large language models have come out and the attitude towards them is, you know, definitely more hostile than it used to be when they were just science fiction. Thinking about how do we portray those kinds of things. And this gave me a lot of really good thoughts about how to do that moving forward, you know, practical tech and this idea of sentience versus intelligence. And, you know, they do that too in the Old Man's War. I know I talked about that in the last episode with the Oban, who were intelligent but not sentient. And then they became sentient. And it's such an interesting distinction and conversation that I'm really interested in having. And I think we need to be having that conversation in this moment with where technology is going. So that's that. Now back to the snack. I think that there were 3 big points to this snack. The first being that this was an Airheads Xtreme, which did not correlate with this story. This story was cozy. It was not extreme, but the story did have a road and the snack looked like a road. And it was a rainbow, and there was a gay couple. Her brother had a partner and they were gay. So we've got a rainbow, a road. It was not extreme, but I think 2 out of 3 points matching isn't too bad. So I say it's a certified snack for this story. Thanks for hanging out with me today. And if you are excited for next week, like I am, you can get a jump on the story. Down in the show notes, there is a link to Negative Scholarship on the Fifth State of Being. This one is 8,730 words. And I cannot wait to chat about it with you next week. Have a good one. Bye.